The blues must have been invented by a man because we just love to complain about little things that we actually love. Is that not funny about guys? Like, that's like our thing. Is like, we love it. It bothers us. They say there's no stronger love than a dad and a pet that he swore could not come into his house. And then like 2 weeks later, they're like best friends and it's like sleeping in his bed. Daddy Blues. I asked Drew and the band. They were just riffing, and I said, I think we could do this. Drew is soon to be a dad coming on his way, and I have tried to let him know how awesome it is. Not awful. It's awesome. No, I'm a dad for the third time, which is fun, right? Nobody claps for the third. First and second, maybe. First time, third's like, that's a way to live your life, I suppose. No, we did, and it's great, and I love it because as a dad, I feel like men are exceptionally. This sounds like this is not the start of a comedy show. That whole movement right there felt like I'm like entering into a comedy act. There will be a message, I promise. But I feel like, Dad, we're so territorial. Like I got it's not a Lazy Boy, it's an off-brand Lazy Boy, but it's a recliner. It's nice, it's overstuffed, it's enjoyable. Man, if you haven't got one yet, anyone, get one. They're really nice. The problem is once you get one, you become instantly territorial, and only you can sit in it. I had some family in town, they were sitting in it, and I had to like bite my tongue to be like, get out of my chair. I've had a long day at work, I need to sit in my chair. But my kids love sitting in it and rocking aggressively and almost flipping it over and putting stickers on it, which is what's slowly happening to it, and scratching it. They're scratching like the suede. And it's just frustrating. And so I love that. Then I have a bed. I'm sure most people have a bed, and my kids have taken that over, which is super cool. The only kid in my household, the only person that in my household that sleeps in their bed all night is my oldest son, because I have a 6-week-old daughter, and so she wakes up, and then at some point, my wife takes her into the living room, catches up on TV shows while feeding her. My youngest daughter, if you guys were here a few weeks ago, I talked about that she's going to be an exceptional leader. She does the power move pretty much every night where she wets her bed, pees through her diaper, and then comes into my bed and kicks me out. And so it's really cool because I got to go in her bed, make sure she didn't pee, and sleep in her adorable, barely fits me bunny bed. And it's just great. I just think as a dad, like I've become so territorial, and yet I have like, nothing of my own. I have like my car rides by myself is all I have. Another quality of dads, I think probably number one quality, which we all look forward to, is our dad jokes, which I was exceptionally good at, just becoming good at. And I'll just be completely honest. The proper response to a dad joke is not a belly laugh or like, ha-ha. It's a groan. It's like a sigh. It was like, oh, no, that's terrible. Why would you say that? And so I'm just going to read a bunch to you guys, and we're going to do this. Okay, here we go. And they're rhetorical, so if you know the answer, don't take away my thunder. Why did the Scarecrow win an award? Because he was outstanding in his field. Ooh, buddy. Why couldn't the bicycle stand up by itself? It was too tired. Get it? Because bicycle, it's like too tired. It's got two of them. Did you hear about the restaurant on the moon? It's got great food, but there is no atmosphere. Atmosphere like the ambiance or whatever. Why do melons have weddings? Because they cantaloupe. Yeah. Yes. What happens when you go to the bathroom in France? European. What's the difference? Thank you. Wow. You guys are too kind. I won't stop telling these, so you stop laughing. What's the difference between a poorly dressed man on a tricycle and a well-dressed man on a bicycle? Attire. Attire, get it? Because attire is what you wear. That's also part of dad jokes. You explain them to death. That's probably my favorite part. There's a whole segment I want to do. Why do you never see elephants hiding in trees? Because they're so good at it. Okay, all right. Moving forward. Moving on. Get it? Maybe it's the opposite. All right, so we've been in a sermon series about Elijah. Elijah is a prophet. Elijah back there. His name's Elijah, named after the prophet Elijah. Elijah did some awesome stuff in the name of God. He was a prophet, and he was a prophet under a really bad guy. And his wife are really bad. Some scholars would say the most wicked people in the Bible are who he was the prophet underneath. And so it makes for a very interesting kind of story. But before we jump into the story, there's a passage that we came across. All the pastors not came across. It's been in the Bible for a really long time. But we thought it is very fitting. It's a really powerful scripture. I think it's fitting for Father's Day and honestly fitting for kind of any day of the week. And it says this. It says, "Remember the Lord who is great and awesome." and fight for your families. Your sons and your daughters, your wives and your homes. Nehemiah was a prophet. He was going through all kinds of interesting stuff, and he was having to fight. And I think that is true for us, that we are called to fight. That we're called to fight for our families, fight for our marriages, fight for our kids, fight for our very homes, because we drift towards passivity. And so this verse, I need to put it up on my walls. I want to make it a life verse for me, but I think it's true for us, and I think it especially relates to this message as we unpack something that I think most of us would never admit that we have. And so kind of a guiding thing, a guiding phrase is that your dedication is determined by your daily decisions. If I want to know what you're about, if I want to know what you're passionate about, if I want to know what you care about, what you think a lot about, I can look at your calendar. If you keep a calendar, if you don't keep a calendar, that says a lot too. If you keep a calendar, I can look at your calendar and say, all right, this is what this person's about. I can look at your bank account and be like, all right, this is what they're about. They're about eating food. They're about buying new gear, whatever it is. I can look at your web browser history and know what you're about, right? If I could read your thoughts, I could know what's going on, what the idle time that you spend your thoughts on. For me, something that's coming to a close because all the good sports are now over. Sorry to baseball, but who really wants to watch baseball? In person, it's fun, I'll admit it, but it's fun because you don't have to pay attention, right? I mean, like, let's be completely honest. Imagine you're in a relationship with someone, it's like, I love hanging out with you, I don't have to pay any attention to you. That would make you sad. Baseball should make us sad, but I know it's America's sport. So anyway, moving forward, but I was obsessed with sports and like basketball, and I'm so stoked. I'm like, any Warriors fans in here? Boom, Kawhi Leonard, the three-peat killer, did it to the Heat, and now he did it to the, what were y'all's team's names, the Warriors? Y'all guys did not war in that battle. Anyway, so I was obsessed with sports, though. You could look at my life and my priorities and see that I'm spending way too much time on ESPN, right? We just posted on social media, what's like the ultimate dad gift? Some of it's gear. My wife got me this cool case for like my AirPods. Some of it would be gear stuff. Some of it would just be like time by yourself. Anybody there? It's like I could sit in 4 hours in a room with nothing going on. That'd be fantastic. Just like silence my mind, not have people yelling and screaming at me. But whatever it is, if you could describe your ideal dad gift, if you could describe your kind of daily decisions, it reflects what's going on in your heart. And there's nothing wrong with those things, but if you twist it to an inappropriate way, it becomes a problem. And so what we have to recognize is that there's a battle in our hearts for who or what we will worship. Right? Like most of us say, I worship God, and that's it. I don't worship anything else. I don't worship sports. I don't worship my job. I don't worship my family. I don't do any of those things. But if you're not careful, those things that are just that, they're things, can move from being something good, something worth running after, something worth being good at. They can turn into an idol. John Calvin, famous reformer, Protestant Reformation, where the Catholic Church and the Protestants kind of split off for a variety of reasons, including being able to read the Bible in your own language, being able to go to God on your own through Jesus, all that. He was a part of this. He has this awesome quote. He wrote all kinds of really deep, amazing kind of theology. He wrote this thing. He says, the heart is a perpetual idol factory. It is always in the process, if we're not careful, if it goes unchecked, of producing idols, producing things that we move from good things to like ultimate things, to where we take things that are fine and you should worship, you should focus on them and try and be good at them, and we put them in a position, in a spot that's designed only for God. Tim Keller wrote this, awesome theologian, pastor in New York City, wrote a bunch of books. Pretty much anything he's written is worth reading. He says the human heart is an idol factory, quoting John Calvin, that takes good things like a successful career, love, material, possessions, even family, and turns them into ultimate things. Our hearts deify them as the center of our lives because we think they can give us significance and security, safety, and fulfillment if we attain them. And there's nothing wrong with security, safety, and fulfillment. I think if you live your life from a biblical perspective, you should be able to achieve security, safety, and fulfillment. But if you're not careful, those very things can become idols. And you can try and make it where your family gives you those things, where your job gives you those things. Whatever your identity is, if it's wrapped up in anything other than God, it becomes an idol in your life. And once that happens, that becomes dangerous because then you start worshiping an idol. You start worshiping a thing that's not God. That's not going to make you happy. That's going to leave you even more resentful. And the passage of Scripture that we're going through today reveals just that. It reveals what happens when the people start following the wrong God and put an idol in the place of God, and really kind of the ultimate conclusion, the ultimate place that it leads them. So we'll be in 1 Kings chapter 18, We've been in here. 1 Kings is in the Old Testament. It is about kings. And there's 2 books about the kings. Different kings, rulers of Israel. You know, Israel said, God, we want a king. Everybody else has a king. We want one. And so he gave him some. And there were some good ones, like David. Some not so good ones, like the one we're about to read about. And you see what happens when a king rules and kind of goes the wrong direction. And so, like I said, this is the story of Elijah. Last week we talked about Elijah performing these awesome miracles. He raised this lady's son from the dead and gave her basically the ability, like she could keep making bread with these ingredients that she thought was going to run out. He was an awesome guy that got to do great things. And a prophet, plainly speaking, is a person that speaks for God to people and speaks to people for God. Kind of both ways. They're a representative. Prophecy really is less fortune-telling, less like future-telling, and more forth-telling, more telling it like it is. Anybody got people in their lives that think they're a prophet, talk like a prophet? I'm just telling it like it is. Don't hate the messenger. Unless you're called by God, I don't recommend ever calling yourself a prophet because all of them lived very difficult lives. And so I will never call myself a prophet. But this is Elijah's lot. He is a prophet called by God. And he has to do an incredibly difficult thing. So, like I said, he's underneath. So the king of Israel at the time is Ahab, like the guy that hunted Moby Dick. And just like Ahab, I'm just kidding. But it really is what it's like. But he was a really bad king, one of the worst kings, most evil people in Scripture, and a horrible king for Israel. His wife's name was Jezebel. This is the story, this is the person where we get why Jezebel has a negative connotation. Because it's just associated with who she is. I'm not saying if your name is Jezebel that you are, but this is where it came from. And so, she's like such a Jezebel. It's this person we're talking about. They're super evil. They're super bad. Here's how bad they are. So this is Israel. This is God's people, right? Called out. God, took them from Egyptian slavery, turned a nation of slaves into a nation, did all of this awesome stuff for his people. They were now worshiping Baal, who was the prophet or was the god of fertility. Fertility, kind of anything, whether it was economic fertility or like fertility within your family, or if you want to have fertility at your business or fertility, like, success in war, they would worship Baal. And the way they would do that is they would throw up this big Asherah pole, which is a giant pole, and they would worship around it, hoping that God would bring fertility in whatever kind of realm that they needed it. And so this is the king of Israel. He's doing those things. His wife, Jezebel, is said to literally be supporting hundreds of Baal's priests. So she's like feeding them and giving them lodging and like probably giving them a little bit of a stipend and everything. That'd be like that. This is the queen of Israel, like the king's wife. She is doing these things. Not only are they supporting the prophets of Baal, they are going about sending out their military to kill God's priests. And they want to eliminate them. They want to completely remove them. So Elijah, being a prophet, has been running from Baal, or running from Ahab and Jezebel. Now, in the story, he's greeted by a guy named Obadiah. Obadiah worked for King Ahab. He was like the royal steward. He kind of like ran the household and, made decrees and probably had, all the hard conversations. Obadiah, though he worked for the king, still served God faithfully. And he's actually said to have been hiding priests on his own dime, on his own ability, hiding God's priests in like caves and things. And so this is the setting for the story. And Elijah's been kind of running around. Okay, all right, 1 Kings chapter 18, verse 16. So Obadiah went to meet Ahab and told him. And Ahab went to meet Elijah. When he saw Elijah, he said to him, "Is that you?" This is Ahab speaking to Elijah. "Is that you, troubler? Is that you troubler of Israel?" This is how all the conversations went at like PTA meetings with my parents when I would go to there. My teacher would see me and go, "Oh, this is you, oh troubler of Miss Brown's 6th grade English class." And I'd be like, "I'm so sorry." My parents would look at me, and it was bad. It's not the title you want ever to have. Like, I get it's kind of fun to be funny and stuff like that. But you don't want to be the troubler of Israel for the guy that runs the country, right? Like, you don't want to be known for the wrong reasons to people that are in charge, because you're just a thorn in their side, and they're going to want to take you out. Verse 18, "I have not made trouble for Israel," Elijah replied, "but you and your father's family have. You have abandoned the Lord's commands and have followed the Baals." Anybody ever gotten to call out generational sin for a family? Been like, you and your dad and your grandpa, you're the reason things aren't going so well. I've never had the opportunity to do that. I hope to never have the opportunity to, because it sounds terrifying even if it's not for a significant person. But this is what Elijah says. Then Elijah says this, verse 19. Now, summon the people from all over Israel to meet me on Mount Carmel, and bring the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table. So he's like, we're Israel. We're God's chosen people. I want you, king, queen. We know about the prophets of Baal, the false god that you're worshiping, that you're also supporting, like using our taxes to kind of take care of. All you guys are going to meet me on top of the mountain, and we're going to settle this once and for all. There's one Elijah, 450 prophets of Baal, plus, I'm sure, extra royal support staff. Verse 20. So Ahab sent word throughout all Israel and assembled the prophets on Mount Carmel. Elijah went before the people and said, how long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him. And the people said nothing. This would be like if Pastor Carter, wherever, you can make up the spot in your head, a spot you shouldn't be. Just leave it at that. Carter shows up and says, oh, okay, cool. So this is what you're doing, and you're embarrassed, and you're stunned, and you're like, how do you even know where this place is? You shouldn't be here. And he's like, that's not the point. And then, you try and justify kind of in your head. And Elijah's just like, I'm sick of this. I'm tired of this. You guys know what we're supposed to do. You were raised with families telling you how you're supposed to worship God and how you're supposed to live your lives. And yet we get a new king. He starts doing this. You think, yeah, this is kind of fun. I'm going to serve this God. And before they knew it, they had taken things. They had taken this idea, this worship. What harm could it do? How bad could it be? And it became an idol in their lives. And like I said, none of us like to think that we have idols in our lives. But imagine this. Imagine if you have shelves in your house and you have a shelf that's fairly tall. That's where God belongs, right? God is front and God is center. Nothing is above him. He is the highest, most significant. It's where you get your values from. It's how you live your life. And then we have lower tiers, right? And that's normal. You're going to have your family. You're going to have your career, hobbies, things like that. It's normal to have kind of a hierarchy. But what happens with idols in our lives is they always start out small. They always start out insignificant. And then before we know it, they are gods in our lives. And we are trying to serve them. We are trying to make them happy. We are trying to appease them. And we have people, we have moments in our lives where our idolatry is called out in front of us. And our first reaction is, that's right, that's true, I messed up. Let me take this idol, throw it away. No big deal, moving on. No, that's not how it works at all. If you want to know how quickly we idolize things in our lives, just look at children. Even if you don't have any, just watch my kids today. They're going to see the muffins in their life, and they're going to think this is something I need, and it goes from being this very basic need to if I don't have this, I may die. I may lose my mind. I may never be able to live again. And that's a child, right? And we look at children and go, oh, how cute. That's so funny. God looks at we are God's children, right? And I know we're adults, and we pay bills, and we do grown-up things. But in many, many ways, we are exactly like children. We get things in our lives that are things, and they're good things, and there's nothing wrong with them, and we move them from a place of being a good thing to an ultimate thing. And so consider this sermon, or consider this passage of Scripture, or just a moment in life that we are all being called out for having idols in our life. I don't know what your idols are. If I say something specific, I swear nobody told me. I'm not reading your emails. I'm not reading your journal. That's just how God works. Carter always talks about that anytime you have to preach or teach on a message, God works it inside of your life. God is working on it inside of your life. It's really frustrating. I can't wait till I preach a message on how to handle having too much money and too much free time. But no, we're talking about idols, and so that's where I'm at. And so Elijah just calls it out, just tells it like it is. You guys have abandoned God's commands. And they're like, no, we still do the holidays sometimes, right? When they come up, we do the things. We add the other stuff, but no. And he's like, no, you're following a false god. Straight up. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm telling you how it is. And the key identifier, the key word when you're thinking about this is inappropriate. Inappropriate security, inappropriate fulfillment, inappropriate identity. There's nothing wrong with having money or a family or accomplishments. I think if you live your life according to biblical concepts and biblical wisdom and stuff like that, you should have money. You should have a family. You should have a career. You should be accomplishing things. I think we should work unto God, right? We should do these things. God is not calling you to be a bad parent, doesn't want bad marriages. He wants all of these things because the family unit, marriages, all that, they all point to God. We are a family. That's the identifier God chooses. He is our Father. So there's significance there. But if you take that from being a good thing to an ultimate thing, it becomes a problem, right? Like we can become obsessed with money. Like how much money is enough? Is there a certain amount? If I had this X amount of dollars, sure, 500 trillion gazillion dollars. Okay, sure, that would be more than enough money. I think I could make do with that, right? Like how much money do you actually need? Not how much money do you want. Like right now, how much do you need? We're not taught this. We're not taught this in our culture. Get more, get more, get more, get more, get more, get more. Don't live practically. Don't live frugally. Don't save up. No, like spend that. Be like the average American. Spend 110% of your income. I'm no mathematician, but that is not good because that extra 10%, I don't know where it comes from. It comes in the form of debt, which you pay back over your lifetime. What about family, right? There's nothing wrong with wanting a family. I love my kids. I love my wife. I love all those things. But if I'm not careful, they'll become ultimate, right? Because kids are so confusing, and this is just painful. Carter's going through this right now, but on the other end, his daughter Avery just graduated high school. And they've done a great job of, Isaiah's already graduated, gone to college. They've done a great job of raising kids that have like left well. And like you want that, right? But at the same time, like not too well though. Are you guys ever going to come back? Like, do you even need me anymore? And it's like, no, like you need to prepare them to leave. And so for me with my kids, I have a 6-week-old. And it's just, it's awesome and, frustrating. It's great because she can't really move very much. She can't get herself in danger. But I have children who like, my Tucker's like, she was crying. So I threw a blanket over her face last night. It was like, someone is about to get choked out. It's not going to be your younger daughter. Just like had to teach them these things, right? And so you have kids, and if you've had puppies, maybe a similar experience. You have these things that are so helpless. They need you for everything. Like literally everything. They can't do anything on their own. They can't even wipe their own butt. They can barely feed themselves. They can't even fall asleep on their own. They do these things. And then suddenly, without you knowing it, they are throwing themselves into dangerous situations. I love watching. We were at PLNU by the amphitheater, and my son and daughter were climbing up like the railing, not on the steps, of course, but like on the dangerous part. And the coolest thing as a parent is when you get to the point where your kids put themselves in such danger that you can't do anything but watch, because if you yell at them, it's going to scare them and they're going to fall off. And so you just have to watch in slow motion as they kill themselves. It's just like, it's amazing and it's exhausting. But that is what happens. And if you're not careful, they can become an idol in my life. Their success can become an idol in their life. And not God's version of their success, because that's fine. What I think is successful. I can look at my kids and say, if you don't do these things, if you don't meet these accomplishments, if you don't meet these benchmarks, if you don't meet these metrics, you're a failure. And I would never say that, but if I'm not careful, that's how it goes. What about accomplishments, right? Getting the promotion, earning the degree. When does that end? When is that enough? When you look at your job, is it that you need a certain dollar amount? You need a certain amount of promotions? You need a certain amount of like freedom, rest, vacation days? What is it? If we're not careful, the good things become the ultimate things, and they become idols in our life. And you take God from his position, and you put him in a lower shelf. You get rid of him entirely. That's what happens when inappropriate security, fulfillment, and identity happens. And so, like the people of Israel, we are confronted with what to do. Hopefully you're already thinking, okay, there's some idols in my life. There are some things that I have elevated a bit too high. I think about them too much. I'm investing in them a little bit too much. And we have the gift of a decision. We can choose. Elijah lays it down. Choose today who you're going to serve. Choose today who you're going to serve. Make that decision, and we have the same option. But we have to make a decision, because indecision, not making a decision, is still a decision, right? Oh, I did not do it, so it's not that bad, right? No, like it's bad. Like have you ever like driven with someone that's like a really timid driver? It's terrifying and it's horrifying because they're on the road and they have this 8,000-pound vehicle and it's like, no, like you need to make that exit, or like you need to like put on your turn signal. It's like, no, we're just going to be cool. We're just going to be laid back. It's like eventually indecision becomes dangerous. Eventually not making a decision moves from being a habit and it turns into a lifestyle. And once again, the people, they said nothing. They were stunned. They're probably embarrassed, probably a little frustrated. Who are you, Elijah, to call us out? This isn't going that poorly, is it? Something we have to do with the idols in our lives is test the contenders. Test the people that are competing for your attention in your life. Test the things that are getting more attention, more energy, more thought, more anxiety than God is getting in your life. And choose who you're going to follow. All right, so continuing. Verse 22. So, everybody gathered, they hang out. Elijah said to them, I am the only one of the Lord's prophets left. but Baal has 450 prophets. Get 2 bulls for us, and let Baal's prophets choose one for themselves, and let them cut it into pieces and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. I will prepare the other bull and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. Then you will call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord. The God who answers by fire, he is God. Then all the people said, what you say is good. So this is Showdown at Mount Carmel. Kind of sounds like corral. Basically, a barbecue is about to happen. If you know anything about the Old Testament sacrificial system, they would take an animal, they would chop it up, they would cook it, do different things with it. It was an offering to God. So this is about to happen. This is about to go down. And like any good Father's Day, we all need to have a good barbecue. And so what we can do with the idols in your life, and I hope we all do it, and I hope you're working through them in your head right now. Is this an idol? Is this like a major idol? Is it a minor idol? We shouldn't have any idols. We should serve God only, right? Like you read the first 2 commandments, 10 commandments, like there's only one God, and you're going to worship that God. No other gods. That's it. Plain and simple. Okay, so he's talking. So he says, all the people say, what you say is good. They had no idea what was about to happen. Verse 25. Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, choose one of the bulls and prepare it first. Since there are so many of you, call on the name of your God. I really like Elijah because this is some serious sarcasm that's about to be laid out. I am really excited about this. I feel like it justifies my personality type and just the way that I'm really sarcastic. So he does this. So he says, since there's so many of you, there's 450, there's just one of me. You guys do it. Chop up the bull, do your thing. Build your altar. Oh, your altar's already there. That's right. It's supposed to be an altar to God. But you guys already have your altar here. That's really convenient. Seems wrong, but no big deal. 26. So this is the prophets of Baal. They took the bull given them and prepared it. So chopped it up. Pretty graphic thing. Then they butchered it is probably a more humane term. Then they called on the name of Baal from morning till noon. A couple hours. Praying to God. Starting to yell at him. Baal, answer us, they shouted. That's what my kids sound like when they're talking to me. Dad, 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 answer me. Yes, Dad, 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 answer us. They shouted, but there was no response. No one answered. So they step it up to the next level. And they danced around the altar they had made. Okay, little dance offering. Never hurt anybody, right? Every good party has a dance segment to it. It's like a musical. Verse 27, at noon Elijah began to taunt them. See, he told you taunting is a spiritual gift. Drew. Began to taunt them. Shout louder, he said. Surely he is a god. That's just great. I just imagine him laying back, right, kind of falling asleep. They're making fools of themselves, getting after it. No answer. It's like, this is a nice spectacle, but like, who are you doing this for? Perhaps he is deep in thought. Oh, he's like a deep thinker. Hard to get his attention. Or he's busy. It's like shopping, running errands, doing something significant, or traveling. It's not that idea, right? Like their God's off in another place, another continent or something like that. I don't know. Maybe he is sleeping and must be awakened. That's just rich. That's just so good. That's just so insulting. So Elijah's saying these things, taunting them, mocking them, while Israel sits there super confused. We've been worshiping this God. We've never actually seen this God do anything. Let's wait and see if he actually does something. Verse 29, so they shouted louder and slashed themselves with swords and spears, as was their custom, until their blood flowed. So they started cutting themselves. Okay, our shouting is not making enough. We can't just call out to him casually. Our dancing is not working, so now we're cutting ourselves. We're going to really prove to God, prove to Baal that we're serious about this. And so they start doing those things. Midday passed, and they continued their frantic prophesying until the time for the evening sacrifice, but there was no response. No one answered, no one paid attention. So all day long, from morning until evening, they were in hysterics. They were getting after it, calling on their God, calling on their idol to answer, whom they were completely honest with themselves. They'd never seen do anything for them. It only asked for things. And this is what idols do to you. They make you perform for them to act. They make you perform to appease them. And when you look at Scripture, when you look at Jesus, it's not that way at all. It's not our performance that justifies us with God. It's Jesus's. And that should be like a thank God moment. Because if it was up to us, if it was our performance, if it was our abilities, if it was how well we could, like cross every T and dot every I, what happens when we mess up? What happens when our performance isn't up to snuff? It doesn't work anymore. Am I serving something that's pushing me towards destruction? Like the prophets, they're having to cut themselves, slash themselves, wound, injure, scar themselves to show their dedication. And when we look to Jesus, we see that he took our pain. We see that he took our suffering. He took the punishment that was deserved, that we deserved. He took it for us. He moved towards destruction so that we could be complete. But an idol will have you do the other thing. An idol will have you run down the road to destruction. The idea, the law of diminishing return works perfectly here. The more you chase down an idol, the more you chase down an addiction, the more you chase down something that's inappropriate and can't fulfill you, the more closely you will have to always live at the edge or the boundary of what you're comfortable with, because eventually it stops bringing about the same response. You just have to do more, I have to do more, I have to do more. And Jesus tells us you get to rest. And finally, are your requests met with indifference? If you've ever been addicted to something, you've had this moment of clarity, this sobering clarity where you have landed and you look at yourself and you think about the situation you just put yourself in for the 1,000th time when you swear you wouldn't do anymore, whatever it is, and you just have this moment of clarity and you're like, why aren't you giving me what you used to? Why aren't you giving me what was promised? That's an idol in your life. That is the indifference in your life that just doesn't work. And so we need to consider if there is someone or something better. All right, here's where it gets fun. All right, verse 30. It says, Then Elijah said to all the people, Come here to me. So you can imagine them standing off, watching 450 people perform and wound themselves and scream and shout all day long. And Elijah says, Everybody come here, come close. It's just me. It says, They came to him and he repaired the altar of the Lord, which had been torn down. At the top of Mount Carmel, there was an altar that was designed. You could go there, make sacrifices, worship God. But at this point in their life, in the life of Israel, it had been torn down, and a false god was now being worshipped at the altar. Elijah took 12 stones, one for each of the tribes descended from Jacob, the 12 tribes of Israel, to whom the word of the Lord had come, saying, Your name shall be Israel. He's reminding them who they are. He's reminding them of their history, where they've come from. Verse 32, With the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord, and he dug a trench around it large enough to hold 2 seahs of seed, which is about 24 pounds. Decent size hole. He arranged the wood, cut the bull into pieces, and laid it on the wood. Then he said to them, Fill 4 large jars with water, and pour it on the offering and on the wood. Do it again, he said, and they did it again. Do it a third time, he ordered, and they did it a third time. The water ran around the altar and even filled the trench. So 2 things. God had, as a punishment, as a way of getting their attention, had made a drought come. Hadn't rained in a really long time. And so just imagine the context, right? They're on top of a mountain. They had to carry all kinds of stuff up there for like the ritual sacrifice and all those things like that, including water. That was very precious because either they had to get it from like an oasis or they had to transport it from a really long way. And Elijah says, pour a bunch of water on top of the thing which we are going to set on fire. I am no rocket surgeon, but I know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that fire and water do not mix well together, I think. So it's a drought, and they're trying to set something on fire, and he's like, pour water on it. So he's just kind of bragging at this point. 36, at the time of sacrifice, the prophet Elijah stepped forward and began slashing himself and praying and screaming. No, that's not what he did at all. It says he stepped forward and prayed, Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel and that I am your servant and have done all these things at your command. Answer me, Lord, answer me, so these people will know that you, Lord, are God and that you are turning their hearts back again. It says, Then the fire of the Lord fell and burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and the soil, and also licked up the water in the trench. When all the people saw this, they fell prostrate, fell on their faces, and cried, The Lord, He is God. The Lord, He is God. So God shows up. God shows up in a powerful way. And what I love so much is that God responds to simple prayers. It's not the theatrics that we do that get God's attention in our lives. It's not that like I'm going to make like a really big deal. I'm going to like wear like all the right t-shirts. I'm going to do all the right stuff and like listen to the right kind of music. No, like God hears the most quiet prayers that we are uttering when we are returning back to him. Another thing that God does that we see in Jesus is that our God has bled for us. God does not call us to make sacrifices and injure ourselves and humiliate ourselves so that we can prove how serious we are. God says, I will show you how serious I am about you and about this by bleeding for you. He takes the performance aspect of it away from us so that there is no duplicity. We can't be trying to trick God. We can't be trying to convince him. God did this because he loves us. And true God also has power in our lives. We see that Elijah prays a simple prayer and fire from heaven comes down. And whether it was like a meteor or a comet, I don't know what it is, but it destroys everything, even the very dust. Just scorched earth where once an altar stood. And that's God's way of saying, like, I will respond in power. I don't require an altar to show up in power. I'm God. I can do this when I want, how I want it. But you guys do not have to go and do this performance, this dramatic performance to get my attention. And so for us, as we sit here and as we've been examining our idols in our life and wondering how they got to such a prominent position in our hearts, we have to decide who your God is and commit to go all in. Jesus says that you cannot serve two masters. You can't serve two masters. You cannot serve two masters faithfully. You cannot have two masters that ask all of you, and I'm just going to divide my time up. It just doesn't work, right? A house divided will fall. And that's how it is in our own lives, and that's why there's a battle for our hearts. That's why Elijah simply says, listen, it's fine if you want to follow Baal. Go for it. If you think he is your God, do it. You just saw how ineffective and impotent he is, but follow him if you want. But if God is God, if you were saying that God, if Yahweh is the true God, you must follow him. You must clear the shelf of any other altars in your life, of any other idols in your life. What I love so much about Elijah is that he was the only prophet left. You know, there were some hidden away, but as far as he knew, they were all gone. And there's actually passages where you see where he's lamenting, he's praying to God, God, like, I'm the only one left. And God's like, actually, I've saved some up for you. But Elijah felt so lonely, he felt so isolated, he felt like he was the only person running the race. He felt like he was the only person going after God. And even if that's true, and maybe you have felt that in your own life. I know I have felt it in my own life where I'm like, I'm the only one that seems serious about trying to do this. I'm the only one serious about like trying to do my job with integrity. I'm the only one serious about like trying to raise my kids so that like they love and respect me, but like ultimately love and respect God even more. Whatever it is in your life that you feel like you're doing that feels like I'm the only one doing it, maybe it's not worth it, maybe I can abandon this and God can have other areas of my life, but these other things I kind of maybe worth looking into other idols, that we're not alone. That we're not running this race by ourselves. But Hebrews chapter 12 talks about, it gives us this mental picture of like you're running a race like on a track or like you're running a race like on a trail. And there's pockets of people around you watching you and cheering you on. And I'd like to think that there's people in our lives, you know, that maybe led you to faith. Maybe some parents or some grandparents, some friends, some uncles, and maybe they've gone on that they're watching us. And even the heroes of faith, you know, like the guys in the Bible, Moses and Abraham, and all those guys and the apostles, like they are watching us. And as we continue to walk the path following Jesus, that they are encouraging us to stay faithful. That they're like, we get it. I know the social and societal pressures of what it looks like to run after something else. And he says that therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, there's all kinds of people watching, spectating, cheering us on, let us throw off everything that hinders us. And the sin that so easily entangles us. Anybody feel entangled? Anybody feel like you're still moving, but it's like you got extra weight, like you're just dragging things around with you? That's what idolatry does to you. That's what an idol in your life does to you. It drags you down. It slows you down. If it can't completely stop you, it just wants to get you from barely making any progress. And let us run with perseverance. The race that has been marked out for us. That's the plan that God has for us. And yeah, guess what? It involves sacrificial obedience. Yes, it involves going through hard times. That's part of it. But fixing our eyes on Jesus. That Jesus should be your yardstick. Jesus should be the thing that you look to. That if there's nothing else that seems right or true or good in your life, that we still have Jesus who is leading us. Who is faithful. Because he's the pioneer and the perfecter of our faith. And for the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning the shame, and he sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. That we have the example of Jesus. That if you want to know what love looks like, if you want to know what going all in, selling out completely, clearing the shelf of idols in your life, of making nothing but God your focus, we get to look at Jesus. We get to see that he went all in for us. And so where we land is, what are the next steps? What do I do today? How do I step forward? Yeah, I got idols in my life and I'm sick of them. I want to get rid of them. Now what do I do next? Now it is time for a public declaration of faith. Maybe today is the moment. Our prayer team will be here at the front at the end of praying for someone, that you would make Jesus the center of your life. Not close to the center. You would make him the Lord of your life. Not like a small ruler, but the very Lord of your life. Because idols in our lives are battling for our hearts. We have our all-church baptism coming up here in August, and we have seen so many beautiful stories of families going into the water together and dedicating their lives to God. And the amazing picture of what baptism is, of going underneath the water, buried in Christ, and then being raised to life. And as a family, and as a father, and as a leader of all that, of saying we are committed as a family to running after Jesus. Because there are people in your lives that are looking to you to see how to do it. They are looking to you to say, like, yeah, there's idols, I'm tempted. There's all kinds of things that is wrestling for control of my life. How do I do it? And you might be the only example that they see. Let's pray.